My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with the Oklahoma State University Library, and we're doing an oral history project called Women of the Oklahoma Legislature, Past and Present. And today is January the 26th, 2007, and we're going to be talking with Betty Boyd, who was in the House of Representatives from 1991 to 2000. Is that correct?
Yes, elected in 1990, but actually started serving in 91.
Okay, and finished in
the end of 2000.
2000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to get started. Tell us a little bit about your hometown, your family, how you got started in.
Well, you're in my hometown. I'm one of those rare oldies who was born in Tulsa. Not very far from the OSU Tulsa campus, as a matter of fact. Lived there, actually born in a house over close to Owen Park in 1924. So that's been a while. If your math is good, you can tell. Lived there, was married, lived there after I was married for a while with my husband. And then we built a home not far from there. And now I live way out east. But I have always lived in Tulsa and always intend to, as far as I know.
And do you have siblings?
No, I'm an only child, and I grew up in a house of all women. I wasn't real sure there were any men around until I got married. I had my mom, and I didn't have a dad from the time I was just about a year old. I didn't know him at all. And a mom and an unmarried aunt and a grandmother and I all lived together in a great big two-story house where I was born. So I didn't really miss a person because I didn't know my dad. I missed a lot of father and daughter banquets, but had a great life, great time. Probably didn't do as many things as most families do because there was no man around, and so I never went camping out. In fact, I still consider camping out going barefoot in the Holiday Inn. But then, so there were lots of things I didn't do, but there were many things I did do.
And I guess you learned how to cook with that many women in the house?
No.
No.
Except that was my major in college, university. Well, you see, I didn't have to. My grandmother was the best cook in the whole wide world, I'm quite sure. My mother, who was a first and second grade teacher all of my young life and older life too as well, was a good cook, and my Aunt Margaret was a professional nutritionist and dietitian. So why should I cook? No. But home economics was always one of my favorite subjects, and when I went to university, I intended to get out and edit Better Homes and Gardens because I took journalism and home ec in combination, which is kind of unusual, or was then. I got married instead. Handsome old Bill Boyd came along, and I got married, and that was that.
But you did graduate, correct? From Iowa?
No, I don't have a degree. I'm one of those
MRS
also people. Yeah, well, no, I do have a degree. I forgot. After World War II, my husband was a B-24 pilot in World War II. Flew 50 missions out of Italy as a pilot of a B-24. And when he came home, we'd been married about 4 years when he had polio. He and our daughter, who was a year old, had polio. So I didn't finish school, was really a sort of a caregiver although he got around rather well. He had been totally paralyzed, but he came out of it pretty well and got along pretty well. But anyway, I did not go back to school, but he did. And in 1950, he graduated from the University of Tulsa. And they had their first year of having a PhD degree. And I got one, and it was putting hubby through. So, no, but I do not have an official degree, which with all the varied careers I've had, people always think I have one, I guess, because now you have to have a degree in these things to have the jobs I had. But you didn't then, as long as you could do the job. That was all that was important.
What was your early career?
Well, mama. But my first real career was as a television broadcaster in Tulsa, which I started in the winter of 1955 in December. And I started with a CBS affiliate here and stayed there 10 years as an on-air broadcaster, and then moved to the ABC affiliate in Tulsa for a better job, and was their community relations and for a while promotion manager, but mostly community and public affairs. And I was still on the air, and I was there 15 years. So I had a 25-year career in television in Tulsa, and it was wonderful. And left there because the job of marketing director for the, it was called VOTEC then, but it's Career Tech System in Tulsa. The job became open because a lady retired. And I applied because I'd always wanted to work in education. My mom and all four of my old maid aunties were school teachers. And I always kind of wanted to do that, but not really, because I didn't want to go in a room at 8 in the morning and not come out till 4 in the afternoon. But marketing director for a school district sounded wonderful because I could be a gypsy. And I'd been a gypsy in television. So I became their marketing director and stayed there until somebody asked me to run for the Oklahoma Legislature, and I did. And I got it and stayed there 10 years. And now I do consulting work, and I'm on lots of boards and things like that.
Well, how did your TV career help you with the political career? That'd be so
Well, they either love you or they hate you, and I don't know whether that jibes very well or not. I'm quite sure that name recognition had something to do with my first year of being elected. I don't think it had anything to do with it after that, and it was in a way a hindrance because I had trouble walking. That's one of the big ways you get known if you're running for political office, is to run knock on doors or walk and knock on doors. When I would do that, they didn't want to talk about politics, even after I had run several times. They did not want to talk about politics by and large. Right off the bat, I'd knock on the door and they'd say, "Well, I know who you are. You're Betty Boyd. You've been on television. Well, how's Bob Howard? How's Don?" And they'd ask about all the personalities with whom I had worked locally and some of the folks I'd interviewed not locally. And I couldn't get anywhere walking. So in that regard, it was not a help. And like I said, jokingly, they either love you or they hate you. And they're very free to tell television personalities about anything they don't like about you, in public or in private or anywhere else. I really don't know any other occupation except maybe politics. And that does that, but I will say that television, the media kind of steeled me and made my skin just a little thicker to any criticism. I understood that everybody has a point of view. And it's not always going to be favorable, although usually it is. I didn't ever have any trouble talking on my feet or thinking on my feet in a debate when I was in the House. And that makes a great deal of difference, I believe, because some of the obviously brightest people in our legislature are not very good on their feet. If they can have it here so they can read every word of it, they're all right. But when you have to get up there and answer somebody in debate or explain something to a committee, I think it's easier if you've been used to explaining it to the folks at home. So in that way, I think it helped. Otherwise, I don't think it makes any difference. I think the biggest thing about being in politics and being successful is to have some common sense. And I'm not sure where that comes from or when it comes. I also had an advantage in that my children were grown when by the time I got into politics. And my husband wasn't retired, but he was almost retired. So he could be in Oklahoma City with me almost whenever he wanted to. I wasn't like a woman like a traveling salesman, being away from home and a family 4 days a week. I don't see how the fellas do it or want to do it, the young ones in particular. Also, since there were no term limits when I started, there were before I finished down there, but there were no term limits. You could start older and stay as long as you wanted to, probably.
So how old were you when you started?
Well, I don't know. Do the math. 1990 from 1924.
So in your mid-60s?
And I was not very young, but that didn't, as long as you have the energy for it, I could still do it. As long as you have the energy for it and the interest in it, and if you like people and don't mind listening to them, there's a lot more to being in the legislature than getting up and talking. You also have to listen. And that was my job on television. I was an interviewer. I didn't do news. Women didn't do news when I started. And I wouldn't have wanted to anyway, because I wouldn't want to ask you something you don't want to tell me. I only want to ask you things that make you pleased to tell me, or something you wish to promote, or an idea you want to get out, but I don't want to ask you something you don't want to tell me. And if I had, for instance, when I was in television for a few years, one of the big things was trying to ratify the ERA. Obviously, there were two very strong points of view on this, and I wouldn't have opponents on the same show, ever. I'd have one day and one the next day, or soon. I didn't want people yelling at each other. I don't like yell radio or television. I want them to inform me about something and let me get my own ideas from it and draw a point of view, but controversy in the media is not my thing. I don't like to do it, won't do it, don't like to listen to it. So I think developing common sense, developing listening in the media probably did help me, although I kind of got a dose of that being a mother to 2 children. And a wife to one husband for almost 60 years before he died, so this was neat.
What was it like the first day you were sworn in?
Oh.
Do you remember?
Have you ever seen great mountainous goosebumps?
No.
But that happened, you have to be sworn in every time you're elected. And in the House, you're elected every 2 years. So every 2 years, I wore a nice warm sweater and held on to myself, because I almost never now, still, I almost never walk into that House chamber with what I don't feel. And when I watch the President of the United States giving his speech, I just get, I'm a patriotic junkie, I guess. And those things just make me feel extremely excited. The first time I was sworn in, my family, each time, my family, my husband, my children, and part of my grandchildren were there, and I was glad. I was always sorry my mother wasn't. Mother and I were extremely close, since no daddy was present around to take any of her attention. She never remarried, and so Mother and I were very close, and she had great expectations for me, almost none of which I ever lived up to, and I thought, now Mother would like this. But then I thought maybe she was somewhere up in there anyhow. So, but I still get goosebumps when I go in the Capitol, always. I like it.
What about the first time you presented a bill on the floor?
Well, let me think. I'll have to think. I remember my first debate, but I don't have any trouble getting up in front of people and talking. Never have. I have, in addition to doing the television work, one of the things I did and still do, I do a lot of public speaking. Always have. And I don't have any trouble getting out in front of people and talking. Yeah, I get the jitters once in a while, every time really, but it doesn't last. I used to lose my breakfast every morning when I first started television. Well, I got over that. But you still get kind of excited, the adrenaline goes. And so I'm sure I was anxious. But to be honest, I can't tell you what my first bill was. I can tell you what a lot of them were later. But I didn't present a bill very early in my career. I've always thought that when you go into a new job, you need to listen and learn what you're doing before you just start blurting out that you know it all. And so for a while, I sat and listened. The procedure, although I knew Robert's Rules of Order, the procedure was very different. The House rules are different than the Senate rules even. I didn't know the path of a bill. I didn't know what happened to a bill except that somehow it became law. And so I sat and listened for quite a while. I'm sure I wasn't frightened of presenting a bill to a committee or on the floor. And I know I had a good experience the first time because I never lost a bill ever in my 10 years. I never lost a bill in a committee I lost. Let's see, can't say that, but yes, I can. I never lost a bill in a committee or on the floor. Never. Now, I had one vetoed by one of our governors. Ticked me off. But that's the only one that didn't get passed and signed that I ever ran, and I ran a lot of them once I got started. I do remember my first debate was in favor of parents as teachers. It was someone else's bill. But I thought, my goodness, if we teach our young people everything except how to be parents, why would anybody not like this measure? Well, there were some people with very different ideas about what parents as teachers, they would take away their children, and all this kind of junk, which I knew better than. And that was my first debate. But I was kind of used to debating those on the other side of the aisle. My husband and I were in different political parties, and he was very active in his. And I was not as active in my party, but just as active as a legislator. So I'm having trouble debating it, and I don't remember what it was, the first one. I can tell you what a lot of the others were, but.
Well, did you chair any committees?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. My first year there, I was vice chair of the large education committee, which includes the three branches, Common Ed, Career Tech, and Higher Ed. And I was vice chair of that committee. And then beginning my second term, I was chair of the Common Ed committee, part of that. And I was always on appropriations and budget. I wasn't chair, but I was on the appropriation and budget, small committee for education and total committee, general appropriations committee. I chaired the community and family relations committee, and also served on the public safety committee and public health committee all the time I was down there, in addition to the appropriations committees.
Were you the only woman on some of them?
I was almost the only woman in the House when I first went. There were 5 ladies in the House when I first went, and I was the only one from outside the immediate Oklahoma City area. And I used to wonder why until I thought about it a minute. Younger women, I think I said this earlier, younger women with children don't want to go away and do that. Well, I wasn't in that boat. And it was easy for me we kept an apartment year round in Oklahoma City because with my husband's polio, it was a little difficult. We needed to be on the ground floor of an apartment. And we needed not to move furniture back and forth very often and this kind of thing. So we kept an apartment there, and I lived there 4 days a week. But women who didn't live there didn't want to run for office at that point. Now, there were 2 senators from the Tulsa area when I went in the House, but no other members in the House. Numbers still haven't grown very much, but I understand why. It's unless a woman is my age, they really don't want to leave home that much or that often. And well, if they want to, I guess they should. I think you can have a career and a family. I did all my life, really. But I think that conditions have to be right for you to do that. A, you have to have an understanding husband. B, you have to have children who don't mind being in a fishbowl if you're in a public career, because they are always. It doesn't matter what, if they scratch their head wrong, somebody says something about it, and maybe the kiddos don't like that, so you need to work that out, and your time, and then what is it that you do in your career. I didn't ever have a career that if I needed to be at a ball game to watch my son get clobbered or to be at a swimming meet that my daughter was in, or watch a play that they either one were in, because they both did that a lot, or if my husband wanted me to do something with him, like cook dinner, I needed to be available. But my careers allowed me to do that, except for very specified periods. I had to be at the television station when I had to be there. And of course, when I started television, there was no videotape. So you did everything live. I got up many Saturday nights, got in my car, drove down from my house to Channel 6, which was probably about not far, but 3 miles away, something like that. Went in, did a minute commercial, got back in my car, went home at 10:30 at night. I did this on Saturday because everything was live. Christmas morning was never celebrated until noon at my house because I had to be on television in the morning. Had to do it live. Thanksgiving, same thing. You just had to be there live. So, but those times I knew about. So it wasn't like the boss suddenly said, oh, you need to be here, or this job runs from 9 to 5 and you sit there all day. I've never had a job like that. So that's why I'm very cavalier about saying that you can have a job and a family and do them both just fine. Maybe not superbly, but I don't do many things superbly. That doesn't really weigh me out. But I think you can, and I think I did. At least everyone survived me, even the Republicans.
Well, do you think being a woman was a bigger issue than your age, or age a bigger challenge?
Neither.
Neither.
No. One of the most frequently asked questions from the media to me when I was in the legislature: are you playing in the golf tournament this weekend at whatever? No. Didn't they ask you? Was it because you're a woman? No, it's because if I hit something and go chase it myself, you're going to have to send me to the funny farm. I don't play golf. That's why I didn't go. But that was it. And then for a while, this didn't go on very long, I would drive into the parking lot down at the Capitol, into the House parking lot where I had been assigned a spot. And the nice, wonderful sergeants. I just think the world of every sergeant that has ever worked for the state capital of Oklahoma. They're great people, but they would come up and very apologetically say, I'm sorry, ma'am, this lot's just for legislators. And I'd say, yes, I know. And they'd say, well, are you someone's wife? Are you a legislator's wife? No, I'm a legislator. Because they were not used to seeing women. So if that's a drawback, I guess that was it. And I don't think anybody ever knew or thought or cared how old I was. It's how energetic are you. And the Oklahoma Today magazine and Tulsa People were nice enough to give me the award late on in my career of having been the most productive legislator from Northeast Oklahoma. So I had a lot of energy. I don't think anybody thought about the fact that I was in my 70s a good bit of the time I was down there, if not all.
Puts some of us to shame, I'm sure.
No. I just, whatever I do, I generally go at it and try to do it. And I wish I could please everybody, but my mama told me a long time ago that if you don't want to have anyone disagree with you, go sit in a closet, shut the door, and don't come out. Otherwise, people are going to disagree. And learn to deal with it.
Well, going into office, did you have any particular goals in mind that you wanted to definitely accomplish?
I didn't have any agenda, which is different than goals. Many people go in the legislature with a preconceived agenda. I want to do this. Now, yes, there were things I wanted to get done, basically areas in which I wanted to do well. I didn't have anything in particular, no, not in mind. I wanted to do something good for education. I wanted to do something good for the disabled. And I was able to do both of those things. I wanted to do something good for the health of the people in Oklahoma and the country if I could, as a trickle-down effect. I was able to pass legislations in all of those areas that have proved to be pretty successful. So I had goals that I just wanted to do well, and those were my areas of concern. I didn't know anything about banking and finance, regardless of the fact that I told you I served on the Appropriations Committee. My math's okay. My husband kind of laughed when they put me on that committee, but that's okay. What did he know? But I can't balance a checkbook, but with other people's money I do pretty well. But I just flat wanted to, I didn't know about banking and finance, didn't know anything about agriculture. for having been a native and being a native Oklahoman. I knew nothing about the oil business, so I didn't know much about the energy business. Had lots to learn because we get bills and have to read them and vote on them in all of those areas. And so I didn't want to try legislation in any of those areas, but I did know something about these other things, and I knew I wanted to do something, if I could, that would help in each of these areas. And where we are today, OSU Tulsa, I was a house author on making this OSU Tulsa. That was a big undertaking because the rural areas fought us like crazy. They were all afraid that we were going to take away from the institutions in their areas. Well, as a matter of fact, NSU Broken Arrow got started because of OSU Tulsa's coming in here, and we had to have, some other things. And Rogers State benefited because of OSU Tulsa. So that was a real pleasure for me to work on that, and it was tough. I've never had more meetings or more bill changes in my life than on that one. And I wasn't the principal author, that was in the Senate, but I was the principal House author, and you have to sell it in your own chamber, of course. And so that was a toughie. And for common schools, started the Reading Sufficiency Act, which has brought our reading levels up considerably from where they were. I think they've done a little backsliding in the last few years, but they are strictly local control, so it's all up to the local folks what they do with what we put in place. Teacher Prep Commission. I was very instrumental in getting that started and keeping it sustained, and we have so many teachers today who have the national award in education because, I think, of the Teacher Prep Commission, and because with their formation, the Department of Ed suddenly hyped up their efforts. You get some ancillary effects from whatever you do. Started the fund for the breast cancer research and services to uninsured and underinsured women, which is still going as the Breast and Cervical Cancer Commission now, and I serve on that. And I was really pleased about that. Just really pleased to carry the legislation that helped that get started. Very helpful in several other things as far as school matters are concerned, nepotism on school boards, funding for textbooks, lots of really interesting and things you'd be interested in, because you and everybody else in the state of Oklahoma would be affected by health and education issues, and that's what I like to do. And it was my bill that set up the Department of Rehab, separate from DHS. It was a stepchild under the Department of Human Services because DHS is so big. Mm-hmm. And the Department of Rehabilitative Services needed to be by itself, the agency. And so we finally got that set up, and it's working beautifully. And everybody's happy. DHS is glad I think that they don't have all that responsibility, and the department itself is doing well. And people who need those services are getting them. So all these things were fun.
So you must have had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and stay up until midnight to get all this done.
I read fast.
Really?
I read fast.
That's a skill that helps them.
Yeah.
So
books are my thing, always have been, still are in my retirement, which I haven't done. Retire is not in my language.
Can you describe a typical day from sun up to sunset?
Now?
No, then.
Then?
When you were in office.
Oh.
You lived there, you said.
Yes, I usually went down on Sunday night just because I didn't want to get up quite as early. I'm a late stayer upper. I still don't go to bed till 2 or 3. And I don't stay in bed late in the morning, but I don't get up at 6 o'clock. When the rooster crows, he might as well quit that because I'm not going to get up. But I'm not a late sleeper either. But I didn't want to drive to Oklahoma City, particularly if you didn't know what the weather was going to be doing. And I don't exceed the speed limit. I sometimes come close. But so I'd go down on Sunday night and stay in Oklahoma City then Monday night. Well, through Thursday night, because we didn't have session on Friday until the last week or two. Then, particularly because of my work on the appropriations committees, I we had some Friday meetings, so usually though I'd come home on Thursday. But the time I was down there, from Monday through Thursday, it was be at the Capitol no later than 8 o'clock and sometimes earlier than that in the morning. Read bills, look at what, and our administrative assistants, as they're called now, we called them secretaries then, but they're wonderful and they get things, if you have a good one, which I was lucky enough to always have a real good one, and as far as I know there aren't any bad ones, but I always had good ones. They'd have all your all your correspondence, your telephone calls from Friday before there, and today they'd have emails, and did before I left too, as a matter of fact. And I'd go over those and see if there's anything that needed to be returned right away. On Monday, we didn't have session usually until around noon, so I had all the morning on Monday to do that. On the other days of the week that I was there, no, because we'd have session usually at 8:30, so I had about 30 minutes to do this business. Then you go into session and stay for however long you needed to. And when you're supposed to be in session, I think you should be on that floor. Now you get called out a lot by people in the lobby wanting to visit with you about their interests and why you should vote for or against it. And so you take some time out there, but you don't go any farther than the lobby. We did have our own ladies' restroom, which was just adjacent to the chamber. First time in my life I've ever visited a restroom in a big building like that. I didn't stand in a line, but down there they made things very convenient for you to be able to stay on the floor. And I don't think you should be off that house floor when you're in session any more than absolutely necessary. You are there to listen. Yes, you've heard a lot of it before in committees, if you happen to be on the committee that heard that bill. If you don't, you need to hear what the author of the bill says, what the debate is. You don't make up your mind from the lobbyists out in the lobby. And anybody's a lobbyist, whether they're paid or an advocate, whether they're paid or not. You make up your mind partly from that, but you make it up mostly from what is said by the members interested in it or against it on the floor. So most of my day then was spent there. Didn't ever go out for lunch if I could help it because of parking and unparking the car. Also, here again, I had enough to do to answer phone calls during the lunch hour. So most of us had a microwave in our office, and we'd do something in the microwave, which, by the way, this aunt I mentioned real early on in our talk here that lived in the home where I did, or I lived in her home, however that goes. The professional dietitian is the lady who developed how to use the microwave in this country. So I always patted my microwave when I walked by it because it let me stay in the office and eat. But I'd eat my lunch there. And I know I sound like, oh, terrible. I don't mean to. And most everybody did this. Now, we had a few flakes that didn't. We had a few that were on the phone more than they were in the little alcove to the house than they were on the floor, or they were gone. They may have been somewhere in the building, I don't know, but they weren't there to vote and this kind of thing. And I just think you shouldn't be gone. So most of my days were spent there. By 5:30 or 6, I'd pack it in and leave, generally, unless I had a committee meeting late, and I'd stay. And there were nights when I was there at midnight in committee meetings, particularly in appropriation events, long toward the end of the session. But whatever time I got off and went home, I got off and went home.
Any social life, like with other members of the House or Senate?
Well, generally speaking, there was an event in the evening. This is another reason I didn't get home until late. The events are important for you to go to because this is where you can exchange ideas with senators and members of the executive branch. There's that branch we don't ever want to forget about too, because the ultimate end is that bill has to be signed within that branch. So you can sort of socialize and do some of your business talking at the events that were sponsored by companies or sponsored by, and yeah, we had sandwiches and something to drink and soft drink or not, whichever suited you, generally both. So you didn't Nobody has to get drunk unless they want to. And but at these events or dinner, sometimes a bunch of us went out to dinner together, and this is where you do your off the cuff talking, and a lot gets done there. Amazingly enough, it's not just a social event. Oh, there were parties too, fun things to do, but it was all fun to me. All fun.
Was it usually mixed with the women and the men?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Or they
In fact, when the women of the house would get together, and we did this just for honoring us sometimes, when we'd all get together in a little bunch going yip, 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 we'd sometimes not talk about anything. It's sort of like the umpire and the baseball players getting together, or the manager running out and looking like he's really talking. And they're probably saying, "Where are you going for dinner?" And the men would say, "What are they doing? What are those women up to?" It was really, we did that for honoring us some. But we women in the house did get together some. We weren't all in the same political party. That didn't matter. We all got together occasionally. Not a lot, but occasionally. But like I said, sometimes just for honoring us.
Was there time to develop any close social friends? I mean, good friends with the women? Did you still stay in touch with? Or just no time really?
Not the kind of time that you would have if you were not doing this. I don't think anybody hesitated to make good friends just because someone was across the aisle from you. Men and women friends. Some of my best friends sat on the other side of the aisle from me. In fact, I was called the best Republican the Democrats had while I was down there. But what they didn't know that my husband was, well, they did too. They all had to do was look up when he was in the gallery and he'd be doing this and I'd vote green and go, But I didn't vote just because it was a party issue. Rarely. I can't say I never did. If it really didn't matter to me and didn't matter to my constituents, and I was asked by my party to vote just because it was a party issue, and it turned out 98 to nothing anyhow, it's, I have done that. So I cannot tell you I never voted just because it was a party issue. I did, but only in matters where I didn't have strong feelings. I really don't care what party gives a bill out, who's the author. I don't care what party they're in. I care, and I cared, and I still do. Is it a good idea? Can we make it better by taking something from over here and something from over here and putting it together and making something really good out of it? That's the only reason I cared where it was what can we do with it? I really didn't care. And then I played wife a lot too. Wives learn early on to ask for a cashmere coat when all they want's a wool sweater. You do that in the legislature. You ask for more than you could possibly get. And then you have something to bargain with. But you don't give up your ideals or your ideas. You just play wife. It works.
Sometimes or all the time?
All the time. Almost. Anyway, yeah, it was, there are lots of little things you learn as a wife and mother.
Did you have to share an office space?
Did I have what?
Did you have to share an office space?
Only my first 2 years. And I was, I didn't, my own office was private, but it was about as big as this table because I was brand new. But that wasn't, mine wasn't any smaller than anybody else's that was brand new. I don't mean that. That's just the way that works. Seniority plays a great, I ended up on the 4th floor, which is where everybody thinks is the place to be. And I happened, when I was in the legislature, the party I belonged to was the majority party all the time. There are advantages to that. One of them is what kind of an office you get. But it was always adequate. I didn't spend a whole lot of time in there. My time was basically in the chamber. And reading bills I did in my office, of course. And I tried to read every single bill, and that's a bunch. I at least read all of the new language, all of the new amendatory language, and all of the new sections, even if I didn't read all of the current statute that was being affected by it, because we weren't trying to do anything to that part. I tried to read it all, but when you have 800 or 900 or 1,000 bills out of each chamber, and of course they don't all get as far as the floor because they don't all get out of committee. And if they don't come out of committee, then you don't see them unless you're on that particular committee. You don't see them, but you still end up with, I would say, 300 to 500 bills out of each house that you need to read, digest, and know what they say and what they're going to do. And some of them are 2 pages long, and some of them are 102 pages long. So, and it's legal paper. So that's a bunch.
Well, when you're preparing for a debate, did you do your research yourself, or is that what some of the things your assistant would do?
No. Yeah. Well, let me see. That was
Are
no. No. I would say 99% of the time, I did my own, and I'm assuming that others did too. If I got a real hickey, or if I needed something in a hurry and I was on the House floor, I might use my phone in my desk to call my secretary and or administrative assistant and say, "Can you look up something for me real quickly?" This particularly when they all got computers. When I first went, everybody didn't have computers. The Senate did, but everybody in the House did not when I first went. So looking it up was going to be a matter, or you'd call a staff person. They do all writing, bill writing anyway. House and Senate members do not do their own bill writing. This is done, they make suggestions and approve what's been written. But staff members do the writing because they're attorneys, or most of them are. And, you know, it's all written in pretty legal language. So, and I wouldn't have known at all how to research a bill to see what you needed to do to it, even to make it the way you'd like to have it. Most everything that, the cancer stuff was new, for instance, because no one had done anything about that. When we got the diabetes supplies approved for insurance, or insist that insurance companies carry this coverage, that had to be researched. We didn't have any legislation about that. So something that's brand new, you're different. It's different than something that you are amending, like the nepotism for school board members, for instance. School board qualifications were already in statute, but the fact that you couldn't have anybody within the first or second degree related to you if you were on the school board and they were working for the school district, that wasn't in there. So you had to have somebody research, well, what is in there? What do we have to fix? So, but that's staff members doing the research and the writing and so forth. And then you have to read it to make sure they said what you wanted said, and how also, okay, tell me why I would suggest this that you suggested, staff member. Why would I say what is the rationale for my wanting to do this? But it's kind of complicated.
Did you have the same one the whole time?
No. Not because I was on air, not because I got fired, just because, the first one I had moved to another agency. We got along fine. I don't think either one of us were glad she moved, but she just moved for a better job, frankly. Staff member or administrative assistants did not. I don't know about now, get paid all that amount of money for the work they have to do. Also, it's kind of a part-time job because unless you are way up in the hierarchy, you do not have a permanent one in the summertime, and you don't have a staff in your hometown. So when they talk about all this great pay that Oklahoma legislators get, remember you have to do something about having somebody help you back home when you get home to do all this secretarial work, unless you can do it yourself. And I could do it myself, and so I did. But I don't know what the guys that had 2 left feet for hands and didn't keyboard, I don't know what they did. But I guess they hired somebody out of their own pocket because we didn't get money to do that. But then let's see, I had the same one then for 2 sessions and a different one for 2 sessions. So, but she moved the one that I had for 2 sessions that I just flat out adored, moved to Missouri. Her husband built a retirement home up there, and she wasn't old enough to retire, but she was narrow-minded and went with her husband. Can you believe that? And then I had another one for the rest of my time.
Well, did any of your campaigns stand out as a more difficult one than the other?
The last one.
The last one?
That I did not win. First time I was ever fired from a job in my life. My husband had just died that spring in March, and I was not going to run. Not only because of that, but at that point in my life, how old was I? Let me see. Well, it was 6 years ago, and I'm 82 now, so add it up. I was not going to run again. I wasn't out my term limit yet. But I just, when Bill died, I just thought, oh, shoot, because he was always my campaign manager, plus a great supporter and organizer. He was the organized one of the Boyd family. I'm kind of, let's get it done and let's do it and get it done. And he was, let's organize it, do it and get it done. And I got talked into running again, and that one was hard. That one was hard. I spent more time, spent more money, and lost, not by a lot. But it doesn't matter if it's 1 vote or 1,001. And I live in a district that had become, actually it's about even as far as registration and the two main parties are concerned. But it has and still is quite right-wing. And I am neither right-wing nor left-wing. And so it's hard to please anybody. It was difficult. It was difficult.
Well, you ran 5 times, right?
No, I won 5 times and ran 6.
Ran 6.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those were your opponents? Male, female, or?
Oh, the person that beat me was a woman, and she had run against me before and lost. Other than that, they were always men. The first time I ran, because it was an open seat, there were 5 of us in the primary. They were all men, and I didn't have to have a runoff, which pleased me with that many in the deal. But then the person who ran against me in the general election was a man. And 2 other times it was a man, and then 3 times it was a woman. No, once I didn't have an opponent. 2 times it was this woman who ultimately beat me. I told her if she'd just take a deep breath and sit down, I wasn't going to run after that time. She could have it, but she didn't believe me.
Well, compared to how much you spent your first campaign and in the last one, is there a major difference in that 10 years or 10, 12 years time span? It probably did increase.
Well, that's not really quite a fair comparison, Tanya, because the first time anybody runs, you don't get nearly as much money as you do the second if you're an incumbent, because a great deal of your money comes through or because of lobbyists, and they work for you to get money for you from their people they work for. They don't give you the money, I don't mean that, but the people that they represent do. Which brings up another point I want to mention to you in just a minute. But so the first time I probably spent, I really don't remember, but I would say something in the neighborhood of, let's say $10,000 to $12,000. The last time, and it's gone up way up since my last time, even 6 years ago. The last time I spent almost $60,000. So that's a lot of difference. And I spent almost all of it. I had a little bit left over, which I gave to charitable organizations of my choice, which is one of the legal things to do with what you have left over. But at that point, I knew I was never going to run for anything. There was nothing else I really wanted. I never wanted to be in the Senate. I love the rowdiness of the House. And because the numbers, 101 as opposed to 49, that's, I like that. I like the diversity rather than rowdiness, I should say. Oh, it was rowdy sometimes. Never aspired to anything higher than that. And if higher is a good word. But the other thing I wanted to mention to you when we're talking about money, never, ever, ever did I promise anybody anything except I'd do my best on everything for a contribution. Never did I say, I will vote for you if I have money from your people. No, nor did it make any difference to me. I thought it was nice, and I wrote them thank you notes. But I don't believe in trading your ideals for dollars. That's not that's not statesmanship. It may be politics if you want to be loose with the wording, but I don't play semantics like that. So, but and I don't think most legislators do. I think there are some. Obviously, there are some. There's some at the national level who got in a big hooly-wop for doing that. But and I'm sure there's some locally who would say, well, X gave me dollars, I will vote for X, but not many, not many. It's does X have good ideas? I don't know whether they gave money to me or not, really. Although when you have to make out an ethics report, of course you do know who gives you money.
Is there any one particular memory that stands out in your mind? Anything during those 10 years that's the first thing you think of when you think about your time there?
Yes. Several, but one in particular, I mentioned the house is rowdy. Anyone who ever sits in the gallery must think that none of us on the floor know at all what's going on, because we do talk to each other, mostly about what's going on, but not necessarily. We do get up and go out and talk to people in the lobby, or to take a phone call, or to go to the ladies' room, or whatever. We don't seem to be paying any attention at all. Even when people are debating, which I think is wrong. I think you ought to be quiet. I could never have been a nightclub performer because I want you to hush if I'm performing. If I'm not performing, you don't have to hush, but you hush when I'm standing up there. But one of my dearest memories was the last day that and it took several days worth of being on the floor with it, that I presented my idea for funding the breast cancer fund to help underinsured and uninsured women, and set up a way for the general public to easily contribute to this fund, since it was a public fund and so forth. And we had one gentleman who, and I use that word loosely, who was pretty difficult. Anytime he got up, you knew you were going to be in for it, and he got up to debate. First of all, the speaker said, after I explained the bill and what it was, again, because I had done this a couple days before, the speaker asked, as always, does anyone wish to debate against the bill? And this one man held up his hand, because several people had spoken for the bill, and they'd been very passionate about it, and no one had moved or said a word. I have never seen that House chamber like it was. In fact, Frosty Troy wrote a column about he had, in all his years in covering the House, he had never seen such attention to anything as happened during the explanation of that bill, and why we needed it, and why it was so important, and why it wasn't just a woman's issue, because it's not. Everybody in the family is affected when mama or sister or grandma or aunt has breast cancer. At that time, it was just a breast cancer bill. We hadn't gone into the other part of it yet. But anyway, so then the man raised his hand. He wanted to debate against it. And the speaker said, is there anyone who wants to debate for it? And almost every hand in that chamber went up. They wanted to debate for this bill. And that's a moment I'll never forget. All of those moments. The quietness when people were talking, and the fact of the support from everybody on both sides of the aisle except this one man. I'll never forget that. Never, ever. And it was tough. I'd even had some trouble partly in the background and partly out in public with some women on this, because I was not going to try to get the funds the way they wanted me to, or they didn't want me to the way they thought I was going to. Well, I wasn't going to do that anyway, but it was tough, and the support that I ultimately got was just wonderful. I'll never forget it.
Okay, I was going to ask about obstacles. Do any come to mind that really stand out as big obstacles in the whole process of?
I don't think so.
Being a woman wasn't one.
Actually, there are, no more than in any other business. I had toe stumblers in television. When I started in television, there were not many women at all, at least at this level, and I don't think there probably were very many nationally. And everybody can't be Barbara Walters, or who wants to be. I never wanted to go from, it's like not wanting to be in the Senate rather than the House. I never wanted to go to a larger television market than Tulsa. I had several opportunities because Tulsa's it's a market that's a stepping stone in many things, and television is not the least among them. But number one, I was married, and I wasn't about to run home and fling open the door and say, "Honey, I got a wonderful job in Los Angeles. We're moving." Yeah, sure. He had his own business here. Also, I didn't want to audition for my job every day. Now, the obstacle in the House that was not true in television for me, I didn't have to audition for my job every day. I knew if I behaved myself and did a good job, did what I was supposed to, and got fair ratings at least, I would still have a job. The obstacle in the House is that you have to run every 2 years, which means your term's only 2 years long. The first year you're learning. Now that's not true after your initial term, but you're doing your work anyway that first. You're learning or you're doing your work in the House. But the second year, if you don't spend a good part of the time, and the session's only in the spring, remember. So if you don't spend a good part of your time at least thinking about your campaign, if not actively doing some stuff about it, you're way behind when June, July, and August comes around and you have to suddenly do all this campaigning. That's a big obstacle. I don't know how to overcome it because I understand the idea of a revolution every 2 years so you can throw all the bums out and get all new ones who will become bums the next year. I understand that, but I think that's an obstacle that I have no idea how to overcome. But you do, not necessarily by choice, spend a good deal of that second year you're in office in the House thinking about or actively running for the next time. And I would rather spend those 2 years entirely, even up to November when the election is, doing my work for the House and getting ready for the next year in the House, not having to think about door knocking, having to think about doing mail-outs, having to think about the additional public speaking that you do or must do. And I do a lot of that and did when I was in the House or not. But that was an obstacle. And as far as being a woman, I am not now, nor have I ever been, a feminist, per se. Whatever your definition of feminist may be, if it's some people's are different than others. But it never occurred to me that it wasn't okay for women to work, or that whatever they could do, they should be able to do. All the women in my family, and my mother had 5 unmarried sisters, and then mother had no husband after year after I was born. They'd been married several years before I was born. What does that tell you? Whoops. My grandmother always worked because my grandfather died long before I was born. So all the women in my family worked always. So it was natural for me to think that women could work and raise a family and do the housework. So that was not an obstacle. in my mind, being a woman was not an obstacle at all if you chose the right things to do and at the right time in your life. It would have been a terrible obstacle for me to have been in the House of Representatives in Oklahoma City when my children were in school. I could not have done, but I could be on television. I was right here in town. And except for that 15 or 30 minutes a day that I absolutely had to be because I was on the air, other times I should be, and I was there. I worked all day there. But I could leave and go to a meeting or leave and go to a football game or leave and go to a play, except for that one small window of time. And I could work around that. I don't think there were any obstacles because I was a woman. Really, I just never felt that way. Nobody laughed at me. If they laughed at me, at least they were polite enough not to do it to my face. Yes, I had some arguments, particularly with one adversary, as I mentioned. But that's because he was a little strange. I just don't. He didn't even like for us to have the Women's Hall of Fame. You know? I thought, well, ding dong, why not? You know? Oh, well.
Well, and another thing someone had asked for us to ask about too is about attire. Did you notice if you changed the way you dressed when you went to the...
No, because I was in television and I had to dress up every day. And this is one thing I like about working. My mother taught school until she was way past retirement age. And when the school system finally decided at age 70 she really, couldn't teach anymore because that was the law, I think. She did part-time teaching in schools for exceptional children with learning disabilities. And she could do that. So until my mother was almost as old as I am now, she got up every morning, combed her hair, put on her makeup, got dressed nicely, and went somewhere to work. Well, I've always done that, and I still do. And when I went into televisions, when I changed my way of doing, I would not go to the grocery store with curlers in my hair. You girls don't do that now anyway, but I would not do that. I don't think I did it much anyway, but I wouldn't go dress sloppy. Not, my mother would have a hissy fit if she knew how that I had trousers on today, but we dress differently now. But I don't wear jeans with my knees out at all. So I'm too old a lady to be doing that. But I do wear jeans some, but not to church, not downtown, not on the job. We couldn't do that in the house, but I couldn't do that on television unless I was going to sit down all the time and you could only see me from here up. But so no, being in politics, being in public office did not change the way I did anything as far as I can remember, because I didn't grit my teeth any more there than I had being on television or public speaking, which is the real love of my life, by the way.
I could tell you do it very well.
No, I just talk a lot. And I serve on lots of boards now, and you have to get along with people and do, stuff the same way.
Do you have a particular political philosophy? That's a big question.
Well,
and you may have already covered that, bits and pieces.
Actually, my political philosophy is take the best that everybody has to offer and see what you can do with it to make it better. My political philosophy does not go along party lines. When the reason my husband and I were in different political parties is when we built our first home, it was not in Tulsa County. It was in the city of Tulsa, but not in Tulsa County. And that particular county never had anybody running locally that wasn't a Democrat. So we were both registered Democrats because we wanted to have a say in the primary. That's not the only because. I think, my family were all Democrats, and I think probably his were too at that point. But we were both registered Democrats. When we moved back to Tulsa County, we decided that we'd register in different parties so we could go to both precinct meetings. We could vote in both primaries and vote as we doggone well pleased in the general election. And that's what we drew straws as far as I know. I don't know why we decided. Whatever decided us, it was right. He was basically the Republican. I am basically the Democrat. But neither of us, or he said he didn't, and I didn't follow him into the booth to see, but neither of us ever voted a straight party ticket by marking the top. If you voted for everybody under one column, you still went down and marked and looked to see if you were sure that's who you wanted to vote for, or you cherry picked back and forth. Now, my party probably wouldn't like to hear me say that, having been an elected Democrat official. But my political philosophy is do the best you can for the people you live around and the people around the state and the people around the country, and let it go with that. It doesn't matter which party's name's on it.
Did you have a mentor, a role model, anyone that sticks out in your mind?
Oh, lots of people I've looked up to in these particular areas. We had a lady here in Oklahoma who was from Owasso, who was long before I ever had any idea. Well, I didn't have any idea of running for office until a week before filing time. The year I did, and somebody called and asked me to do it.
My next question.
But this lady's name was Aline Baker, and to me, she was the antithesis of the perfect person in public office because she was intelligent, and if she didn't know it, she'd look it up. Was never afraid to say, "I don't know. Let me find out for you," which is also a good political thing to remember. Common sense out the ears, just all over the place. And she was a lady with it. She didn't tell you owed it to her. She didn't play the poor weeping woman, whatever that is. I don't know what that is. But she just simply went about things in a common sense, good, ladylike, but take charge way. And I looked up to this lady a great deal. I knew her through work with the March of Dimes, which I did greatly, partly because of my husband and my daughter having had polio, and I worked with a national organization a long time as a volunteer. And I knew her in that way, and then I watched her as a member of the House and visited her down there some and saw this pile of stuff she had to go through and read and digest, and I was convinced that she did. So that's what I tried to do as well. And
is she still with us?
I'm sorry?
Is she still with us?
No, she passed away a number of years ago. In fact, her son was on our city council. He is the mayor's chief of staff, I believe, at the juncture of saying this. He was fire chief and for a while, and that was her son. So she mentored a lot of people. But in the political field, I would say that. In television, no, I didn't have any mentors because I didn't know any women in television then. I just had done so much public speaking and was asked to audition for this show they had, and the lady who was doing it moved, and I just fell into it. I didn't have any training in it, which is obvious, I guess, but I didn't.
Must have been something right, though.
My hubby had another saying, be at the right place at the right time, but chance favors the prepared mind. And I had done so much public speaking, I think I was ready.
Okay. So we have 2 more questions then.
Okay.
What have you been doing since you left office?
Well, about the same thing. I'm a member of the Silver-Haired Legislature and also on their executive committee, which keeps me pretty busy. And we take 5 issues each year that we prioritize that we want to advocate for, and attempt to have bills written, carried, and attempt to have them passed. having to do with seniors, of course. And I serve on the Tulsa Tech School Board and the City County Board of Health and the Friends of the Library in Tulsa Board and the Friends of the Library in Oklahoma Board and Gridiron Trust at the Tulsa Press Club Board. So
When do you sleep?
and my whole family, except for one, my oldest grandson lives in Florida now, just recently, but everybody else lives here. All my grandchildren and great-grandchildren and children, so I spend a lot of time doing that. But mostly I just enjoy serving on these boards and still attend the Breast and Cervical Cancer Commission meetings. My daughter is on that commission, and because we both had breast cancer.
Have any of these children and grandchildren politicians in the making, you think?
No.
No.
I don't think so.
But then you weren't either.
But I didn't think I never got made up for it either. No, somebody just asked me to run. I am quite sure because they thought my name, the man who had the seat ran for the Senate. He moved out of district, but he also decided to run for the Senate. So the seat was open. And this happened, sure enough, right at the end of June, and the first part of July was filing time. And I think probably they were looking for somebody whose name wouldn't be totally strange to people. And although I'd been away from television for 10 years, I still continued to do commercials and did until just the last couple of years, as a matter of fact, through my consulting business. That's another thing that I have done. I don't do much of it now. I have done consulting on public relations and marketing. And, and public speaking. I still do 2 or 3 or 4 speeches every week. So it's fun.
Yeah, it's amazing, actually.
And I do like to cook, so I do that.
To share your recipes.
Well, I did with my family for Christmas. As a matter of fact, made an old family cookbook for them with all my grandma's and aunts' mother's recipes, and they thought it was spiffy.
Yeah, I would think I wouldn't mind having a copy myself.
They're pretty good.
And the last question, this is the tough one, but probably won't be for you though. When history is written about you, what would you like for it to say?
We're glad she was here, probably. I just want people to, and I know they won't all, some of them will say, wow, I'm glad she's gone. But not many, I don't think. I don't think I've alienated that many people, certainly never on purpose. Well, once or twice.
Except for one.
But I want people to be, for whatever reason, it doesn't have to be for a specific reason, to be glad I was here. I'm glad I was here. I'm still here. I'm not going. Not ready to catch a bus.
Is there anything else you think we need to discuss, or do you want to think of?
I warn you out now, dear heart. No, not that I know
of. No. Advice for women who's going into politics. You've already covered some of that.
I think don't just do what you like what you do is probably as good advice as I could give. And I have been able in my lifetime to do things I never thought I'd do. I was bashful, part of the wall, all through high school, much too young to be in high school when I started, just barely 13 in the 10th grade. In Tulsa Central with 5,000 other kids in it, and lost because I was just a little girl. Real bashful always, very quiet, never had any idea of doing anything that I ended up doing, never had any training to do anything I ended up doing. But I sit down and stop to think about all of the people that I've been very privileged to be with, to interview celebrities and non-celebrities, a whole book full of them. And one of the first 3 women, in fact, to land on and catapult from an aircraft carrier. New 2 presidents and their first ladies in the capital of our nation. And I could never, for a little girl who was part of the wall, grew up on the northwest side of Tulsa, which is the wrong side of town, supposedly. I certainly, with a single school teacher mother, single when I was growing up, married early on, but one income in the family, and it was that of a school teacher during the Depression years. To get to do all those things, wow. So I want other people to be glad I was here. I'm glad I was here and could do all those things.
Well, future generations will be able to look back and read this and listen to this and say, yes, we're glad
And they'll
she's
go,
here too.
yuck.
No, I'm sure they'll all say that they hope that they're happier spirited when they're your age.
You're very nice. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Sure. Anytime.